I mean, it feels like years ago, right, when WandaVision came out. But, I mean, well, let's check the calendar. I mean, it can't have been more than... Yeah, okay. It's been literal years since WandaVision. Uh, wow. Welcome back to Access Blockbusters, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me on the YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe, give this video a like, let me know that you're enjoying this kind of content. And today, welcome to a look back at WandaVision. Now, for those of you who have been following the channel, you know that I'm a big fan of rewatch series. I think that, at least for me, the first time that I watch any piece of content, whether it's a movie or a TV show, I often don't have the same opinion that I do the second time around. Now, that's not always a bad thing, actually. It mostly means that I'm just trying to take in all the information, trying to take in the story, the characters, the plot details. And I think it's understandable that the first time you see a movie or a show, you just don't have a fully formed, solidified idea of what you think about it. So that's why I think rewatching things is very valuable, actually. I've done it previously on the YouTube channel with the Infinity Saga. I've done it also with the Spider-Man films, and most recently I've done it with the Star Wars films, which I have found to be very, very constructive and refreshing. And so today, as I looked at the calendar and saw that it had been actual years since WandaVision came out and since the start of Phase 4, I decided to take a look back at some of the properties in Phase 4 of the MCU. And like the title of this video says, and like I mentioned earlier, today we are looking at the 2021 Disney Plus show that kicked it all off for Phase 4, WandaVision. So as we did with the Star Wars Re-Examined series, what I'm going to do first is talk about the background, the context, what I was thinking at the time, what news was going around at the time, what the context of the release of this show was, and really how I thought and what I thought as the show was airing and when it finally finished up its initial run. And then we're going to go through a little bit of a play-by-play, just go through some of the major moments, go through things that I noticed this time around, things that I liked, things that I didn't like, things I liked more, and things I didn't like more. And finally wrap up with how my thoughts have changed on this show since I first saw it. And let's be clear, this is the second time I've seen this show all the way in its entirety, so this should be interesting. So for those of you who remember when WandaVision first came out, it was the height of the pandemic. Disney and Marvel hadn't released a movie or show in about a year and a half. And as we were all coming off the high that was Avengers Endgame and subsequently Spider-Man Far From Home, we were looking forward to Phase 4, Phase 5, Phase 6, and then everything shut down and Disney didn't have anything to release for us for a good little bit. But we knew at 2019's Comic-Con that they had a lot of plans, and we knew things like WandaVision, we knew things like The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and actually, if I remember correctly, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier was supposed to be the first show to be released on Disney+. So, and remember, at this time, the only other major Disney Plus show that had been released was The Mandalorian Season 1. So really, Disney Plus was very new, it was getting its legs under it, and it was looking for premium content to release. And finally, understandably so, after many, many delays, they decided to kick off Phase 4 not with Black Widow, not with The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, not with Shang-Chi or the Eternals, but with WandaVision, which, based on the trailers, looked like one of the more zany shows that had ever been made in television history. It looked very odd. I mean, you're resurrecting a character who had died twice in the span of 10 minutes in Avengers Infinity War, and you're pairing him with Wanda, who, I mean, hasn't had the easiest life in the MCU up until that point, and it looks like they're living in a happy sitcom world. That's crazy. However, and you can look at the record, by the way, I've made videos prior to WandaVision coming out, so I have been on the record of saying that I thought at the time that WandaVision had something special about it, and I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just that the trailers look different. I don't know if it's the fact that the style was so unique. But when I first saw the trailer for WandaVision, when I understood the concept, I thought this show might be something special. I also thought that about Eternals, by the way, I'm not going to lie. And to me, by the way, Eternals was a fantastic film. I know basically nobody else agrees with me about that, but still. And then WandaVision released and we got our first bit of Marvel content in almost 2 years, and we were off to the races after that. And by the way, when WandaVision had finished airing, I loved the show. But I was curious to see how it would hold up on a rewatch because, as those of you who have seen the show know, it's a little bit of a slow start. I'll admit that. Like, for me, they were very, very entertaining, but I understand if most people who aren't on board with the whole sitcom format didn't find them entertaining as well, so I understand that. I guess really the big question for me is, did the sitcom format get old, or was it going to have staying power? Because for me, I remember, and I know very well, that the ending emotional parts of WandaVision, and I mean, yes, the finale, the action part of it maybe wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be, at least when I watched it the first time, but still, I remember the emotional parts really hitting hard. So, let's talk about my updated thoughts in this rewatch. First of all, one of the things that differentiates this show from all the other ones, and yes, we have the benefit of hindsight now, but this feels like an actual television show. Granted, I haven't rewatched all of the other Phase 4 MCU shows yet, so I'm not going to be able to speak to how they hold up in terms of whether they're better as shows or I think they're better as movies, but I have rewatched The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and let me tell you, that should have been a movie. But WandaVision really leans into the episodic nature of television. I mean, it's a show called WandaVision, a play on obviously Wanda and Vision, but also television. And by really leaning into the sitcom format, by using each episode to explore a different decade in sitcoms, it works to its benefit for sure. Because you're able to have different things stylistically. You're able to have different things with the cinematography, with the stylistic choices, even with the color grading, with the music choices. And the music, by the way, in WandaVision is fantastic. From the actual song numbers, like the theme songs that they play at the beginning of each episode, to the actual score from Christoph Beck. Just absolutely fantastic. But as I alluded to earlier, one of the things that I think will really determine how much you get on board with WandaVision, either if it's your first watch or if it's a rewatch, is how much you enjoy the entertainment value that the sitcoms themselves have. Because it is a slow build. The first 3 episodes don't do a whole lot to really explain what's going on in Westview. I mean, there are little hints here and there, like Wanda picking up the helicopter that comes through. We learn later that's a sword drone. Obviously, the whole thing with Jimmy Woo calling through the radio as well. There are little hints here and there, and of course, the beekeeper. Who can forget the beekeeper? And obviously, it's episode 4 where the curtain gets pulled back, and I think that that's where most MCU fans who are watching the show for its MCU-ness and not necessarily for its sitcom-ness will get on board with the show. And I'm not denying that episode 4 isn't great. I really enjoyed episode 4, especially after the slow buildup of the first 3 episodes. But for me, the reason that I can love this show as much as I do, and I do love this show, even more so after a rewatch, is because I enjoy the sitcom elements so much. I think it first of all relies on the charisma and the pure magnetism between Paul Bettany's Vision and Elizabeth Olsen's Wanda Maximoff. The two have undeniable chemistry together. And it's so much so that you just forget you're watching a show about an android, a synthezoid falling in love with a human. It's crazy. It's a crazy concept, but you just forget about it because it's Paul Bettany and because it's Elizabeth Olsen. In terms of other things that the show is setting up early on, I mean, there is the whole Monica Rambeau setup that leads into episode 4, and we'll talk about that in just a second, but also Agatha Harkness, who's just known as Agnes through the first 7 episodes. I mean, honestly, there's some intrigue in there for sure. But by the time it's revealed that she's Agatha Harkness, it's not enough to make me care about that character. I mean, she was there throughout the show, and you can kind of piece together that, yeah, she was in control, obviously Agatha all along, the iconic song. But still, I don't think they did quite enough to build her up. It was sort of that balancing act, right? Of trying not to reveal that she's the villain, when in reality, most of us kind of thought she was the villain all along anyway. So then when they do reveal that it was Agatha all along, it just didn't feel as impactful because you only had 2 episodes to fully flesh out her character motivations. Which ended up being, I want Wanda's magic. So yeah, chalk that up to another MCU villain who just wants more power. Okay. I mean, all credit to Kathryn Hahn. She gives a ridiculously charismatic performance, and that really carries the character past the flimsy character motivations, but still, it is noticeably flimsy. But anyways, getting back to the brunt of the show, what I really love is the balance that Wanda Maximoff has to portray, or I guess Elizabeth Olsen has to portray in the character of Wanda. This balance of, I have it all together, everything's going great, and also everything's collapsing around me, but I'm just going to ignore it by casting this hex. I think that that's amazing. It works especially well in episode 3 when she kicks Monica out of the hex, because you can tell she's really going through it, but she's trying to hold it together for her own sake. And then you have this weird illusion kind of Vision trying to piece everything together and figure everything out. It's such great writing because it keeps the audience engaged. Once one question is answered, you think with, I don't know, fake Pietro or Vision coming out of the hex or all of episode 4, more questions are raised, and that's what keeps the show engaging. That's what makes a great thriller. With the inclusion of characters like Jimmy Woo and Darcy Lewis, I'll say that on the rewatch, they were fine. They were cute. I think that their inclusion was sort of just a, hey, look, remember these characters from the MCU? And the introduction of Monica Rambeau, you know, it's there. I mean, she's being set up for the Marvels, so it is what it is. I think they were really there to anchor one of the weaker parts of the show, which is the whole sword angle, because look, I mean, for as much as we talked about Director Hayward when the show actually came out, upon rewatch, Director Hayward, whether or not he's the big villain or whether or not he's just sort of doing his job or whether or not he's justified or whether or not he's just crazy, I think from my perspective, it doesn't cover up the fact that he too is just kind of a flimsy, lame character who doesn't really have that big of a character arc. Whether or not the pandemic played a significant role in that and he had a bigger part to play in the finale, I don't know, but, you know, it's not great. So I will say, I've established up front that the 2 antagonistic forces, basically Sword and Agatha, are not the strongest parts of the show, but I think it's more in service of Phase 1 kind of villains, right? Where the Phase 1 villains in the MCU were really in service of the hero character. They weren't necessarily there to be fully fleshed out themselves, they were there to establish the hero characters in all of their superhero glory. And that's what these 2 characters do, because while you have those 2 antagonistic forces pulling at Wanda the entire show, the main driving force of this show is Wanda Maximoff. It's the internal conflict within her. And what those two things do, Agatha and Sword, is that they draw out that conflict from within herself. That's why the penultimate episode, which is, I think, one of my, if not my single favorite Disney Plus MCU episode of television that they ever made, is able to be so impactful. It's because we are going through Wanda's trauma. It's really, I mean, it's Agatha who's drawing it out for sure, but it's us as the audience reliving what Wanda has had to feel. And so, yes, while I think that maybe episodes 5, 6, 7, they're not as memorable because they're kind of going through the sitcom while we've mostly figured it out, I still think that they have their merits because for me, they're entertaining, and also you're starting to see the cracks form under Wanda, like when she leaves the Hex. When Wanda leaves the Hex, by the way, that is one of the best scenes, I think, in the entire MCU because it is menacing and yet controlled, and yet underneath that control is just chaos and turmoil and anger and sadness. You can see it all in Elizabeth Olsen's performance, so it's incredible. Now, before I talk about the finale, I just wanted to mention a couple other things that I didn't quite like as much in the show. First of all, the Aerospace Engineer. Now, yes, I remember. We were all thinking, is it Mr. Fantastic? Is it Doctor Strange? I don't know. Is it some crazy other MCU character? Look, it didn't need to be one of those crazy characters, but I'm going to be honest here. I was trying to rewatch the show in as objective of a way as possible. So I wasn't trying to get my own expectations up and, Aerospace Engineer, all that kind of stuff. But I will say that they did set up that character to be something more than just a random person who provides Monica with a tank. So that's something that didn't quite sit well with me. Obviously, I'm not nearly as disappointed as it was in 2021 that it wasn't John Krasinski's Mr. Fantastic, who we would get a year later. So yeah, there's that. The other thing is Ralph. Yeah, it was cute. It was a fun stunt casting that Kevin Feige did, And you can go back and watch those videos again. By the way, this is the best part of having a record on my YouTube channel. I never for a second thought that was Quicksilver from the X-Men universe. Never for a second. But yeah, the overall execution of that character, not the best thing. But finally, let's talk about the finale. Let's talk about the last episode, which I remember at the time being somewhat divisive because it was maybe a little more generic than the rest of the show, which is fantastically imaginative and really just genius. So it was a high bar to clear. And I will say, yeah, I like the finale. I don't love the finale because it does revert back to the old MCU trope of hero fighting villain and other hero fighting other sub-villain. Although the White Vision and Vision ending to that conflict, I will say, is very interesting. It does feel very MCU setting up another thing with the White Vision flying away after that, and we'll see him again in his own show, all that kind of stuff. And I think that Wanda vs. Agatha, while fine, is not the most memorable part of the show. So if it had just kind of ended there, I would have been like, that's a little disappointing. But what nails the finale is the emotional ending, because throughout the entire show, what this show never forgot is the emotion. Never once did it lose sight of where its heart really was. And that is within Wanda Maximoff and the Vision. And that scene where she has to say goodbye to Vision is still heartbreaking. It is sad, it is emotional, it's like saying goodbye to a loved one, but it still somehow manages to retain that beauty and that grace and that love that is centered around these two characters, and I cannot get enough of that. So for all of the generic action stuff that goes on in the finale, I will say it ends strong, and that's all I could ask for. So if you couldn't tell as we transition into the last part of this video where I talk about how my thoughts have changed from the last time, which is the first time I saw WandaVision, I loved this show on a rewatch. In fact, I will go ahead and say I loved the show more than I did the first time, which I thought was impossible because I loved WandaVision the first time. I really did. Like, I thought maybe I'm just riding high with the, first MCU project in 2 years kind of thing. But rewatching it this time, having seen everything I've seen from Phase 4 and kind of feeling that, is this Marvel fatigue? Is this too much Marvel? I just loved WandaVision. And I think WandaVision, what was so promising about it, and maybe what ended up being so disappointing later on down the road, is that WandaVision proved what Disney Plus with the MCU could be. It could be sort of this shorter form television while still packing an emotional punch and still having all the things about the MCU that we really care about. The characters, the visuals, the style, while simultaneously pushing the envelope, because WandaVision was like something we had never ever seen before. It just pushed and pushed the boundaries of what even television could be. I would go so far to say that WandaVision isn't just a good, if not the best MCU Disney Plus show, but I think it is just a fantastic show in general. And when I eventually do my re-rankings and all my tier lists and all that kind of stuff, you're going to find, and it surprised me as well, that WandaVision has gone even further up. And if you have seen my previous rankings of the MCU, you'll know that WandaVision was already very, very high. So I cannot stress enough how much I enjoyed this rewatch, how much I love this show, and think it is part of the potential of what the MCU can be moving forward in Phase 4 and Phase 5 and Phase 6. So that was a look back at WandaVision. Have you had a chance to rewatch the show? And what did you think about the show when you first saw it, compared to what you think now, compared to really the rest of the MCU on Disney Plus and in Phase 4 and Phase 5? Let me know in the comments down below. And let me know if you're enjoying this look back in the MCU Phase 4. I'm really excited because I have rewatched some other projects as well. I have some thoughts, I have some updated thoughts, and I'd love to share them with you guys. So make sure to subscribe, give this video a like, make sure to join the Access Blockbusters crew. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel, and I will see you guys in the next one.